Hello?
Hello, good evening.
Yes, it's all good. I'm ready.
Fantastic. I noticed just before there was a little bit of fan noise from something. I imagine that was either a computer or a console or something.
Yeah, it was my PS4, so I've turned that off.
Uh-huh. What were you playing?
I wasn't playing anything, I just had YouTube open.
Uh-huh. Okay. So you use the PS4 as a kind of like what the Xbox One was intended for. I believe they sold the Xbox One as a media entertainment thing where it's not just for games, it's for everything. Whereas PlayStation 4 went hardline. This is games, this is gaming, this is for video games.
Yeah, well, to be honest, I haven't played a game on PS4 for ages, but I do use it just to watch like YouTube and Netflix and stuff because it's just easier. It just rather than hooking up my laptop, which can, lag and all that. So
Well,
it just works.
okay, fantastic. I mean, well, do you pay for YouTube? Do you pay for the subscription to avoid adverts, or how do you manage with them?
No, I just tolerate them.
You tolerate them. Oh, wow.
Yeah, I know you don't.
I just cannot stand them.
Yeah, you
I
do get a lot of the same adverts.
I am not impressed, and I haven't seen an advert on YouTube in months, if not over a year, because I just block everything. I see the like static adverts that aren't just before a video or something. I see those from time to time.
Yeah.
I'm not happy at all with adverts. I'm not happy with how the internet's going. Back in my day, adverts were obtrusive, and I downloaded a whole load of viruses onto my computer, and I had pop-ups every 5 seconds trying to sell me mops from the United States or something. But
Mops.
yeah, I had an advert for the Sweeping Mop. I can remember it to this day. It was just like I would be working on the computer doing homework or playing a video game or something. Then all of a sudden, with a volume at 100%, some American man would be shouting at me trying to sell me a mop. And he was explaining how it worked. How on one side, one like sort of end fitting was a broom, and the other side, and you could replace it with a mop, and it was a broom and a mop in one. It was called the Sweeping Mop. I wonder if anyone actually bought that on the basis of those adverts.
You would think that somebody would, otherwise, that's like the whole point of the advert, isn't it? So I would have thought that somebody would have.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I really I don't understand how adverts work. Sometimes, when I was younger and I actually bothered to watch films or I had the patience to watch films, I'm actually really bad now. Uh, when I was younger, sometimes adverts on YouTube or something would be for a film that was coming up, and maybe I would be interested in watching it. Not that I would go and pay for the film, because I'm just really really evil like that. I don't really pay for many things on the computer on the internet. But it would be informative at least. It would inform me of something interesting. Whereas usually adverts are just for mobile games. Usually, oh, they're just for what do you call it? The freemium games, Raid Shadow
Yeah.
Legends, and all that nonsense.
Well, most of the adverts for the mobile games are just like, oh, what's a bigger number, three or five? I'm going to go with three. Oh no, I lost. I can't get to the pink level.
That said, though, actually, I recall there's a website that I go on quite frequently. Let me try and find it. You'll hear some clicking of my mouse. So GSM Arena is a website where it has loads of information about mobile phones. And I used to go on there quite frequently back when I was still shopping for a phone. Now I've got a really nice one, so I'm not really doing it. Okay, right now the ads are just for Adidas for some random nonsense from coats or something. But sometimes on this website they have adverts for mobile games, and they're like, what they do is it's actually really really smart. So they have an advert for a game that is it's like a puzzle game. So, for example, there is a tube of lava and a tube of water, and there are two
Yeah.
characters, and there's one character's like an evil goblin, and the other one is like a princess, and you've got to make sure that the lava goes on the goblin and the water goes presumably on the princess to get her drenched or something. But the funny thing about it is that the puzzle's just so unbelievably easy and stupid almost, and it's just so tempting just to click it, just to tell them to get lost with their stupid adverts, but of course that's how they win because they do a
Yeah.
puzzle, they make a puzzle that's really easy, and then people who aren't particularly good at games will click on it thinking, "Oh wow, this was so easy." And I think it's actually those people who aren't familiar with games, they are like the best type of customer because they are probably more likely to spend stupid amounts of money on like energy bars and things like that when really someone like you or me will see an energy bar and just think, oh dear, I know what's going on here, and we could avoid it by a country mile.
I just think it's funny that you were saying that the water goes on the princess rather than. No, the water is meant to go on the lava to put out the lava. Although you can use the lava to, like destroy the goblin and all that.
Yeah, I don't know. Either
Yeah,
way,
it's
it's
all very, very basic stuff.
yeah. I remember I had a back when we had an MS DOS computer years and years and years ago. I think one of my parents' first computers. One of the first computers of my parents that my parents had. We had two games on it. One which wasn't actually a game. It was just like how the human anatomy. So there was like the skeleton and all the muscle groups, and you could click on them, and they would show you what they do. That was actually pretty cool when you're a kid. And back when we were really amazed by really simple kind of graphics, where you have a 3D character made up of like 20 polygons, and we think, oh, it's amazing. Um, but there was another game which was like a mathematics and logic game, and you had to kind of move pipes around to get the water from one place to another, and that's basically what half of the freemium games are now. It's just the same kind of thing that we had on an MS-DOS computer 20 years ago.
Yeah, but now it's on your phone, so you can access it easily.
And you can bypass all the levels with
Yeah,
handy dandy microtransactions.
yeah, they can sell you stuff.
Yeah, you can avoid it.
So, did you have a particular topic in mind for today then?
Yes and no. Yes, I
Okay,
originally planned to talk about nostalgia, but
right, okay.
I think we spoke enough about Final Fantasy VIII last time, and I think we'd be talking about Final Fantasy VIII a lot longer. So I thought maybe instead the topic would be designing video game things. So not necessarily designing video games, because that's something I have about 30 minutes of experience in when I was back in 2010, I think. But
Right.
designing video game things, I've had quite a lot of experience in. So, what I would like to ask, maybe to begin with, is, in general terms, how is Level Up Land 3 going?
Level Up Land 3 is going well in the sense that I know because last time I said I haven't really been on it for a while, but I have gotten back to it, and it's just I got this not so much a realization, but just this thought in my mind recently, maybe today or it might have been yesterday, that I've got so much to do because I'm getting all these flashbacks of making Level Up Land 2, and I'm thinking, yeah, it's all that again, but sometimes a bit more nuanced in ways and other things as well. But saying that, when I'm designing stuff, because my current thing is I'm designing the map, like the world map, and I'm sort of piecing together the story. And as I'm, designing the map, I'm thinking about my enemies and right, what goes in what area and at what point are you going to meet certain enemies and stuff. And then just thinking about those things, it does get me excited. So I'm still in that, that initial design stage. Most of it's done. It is just like the map and the story and then the music. Um and I've probably got to do some more sprites, but I don't currently, as far as I'm aware. So that's still going to take a while, but it just sort of dawned on me this knowledge that once this is done, I've got to actually make it. I've got to actually do the long drawn out bits, which does come with really moments of great excitement. I think I might have mentioned this to you in regards to 1 and 2. But when I'm actually making it, the things that bring me the most joy are the simple things, just the little, like in Level Up Land 1, when you extract a spell and the little blue bar flashes and it goes jing, just that like excited me, just the way that that worked. And with 2, it was the menus like flying in and the damage numbers, the way they popped up and then slowly flew off the screen, just things like that. Uh, so I think it's going good. Once I've got the current design thing, once I've got that baked in as much as I can at this point, um, with the map and the story and everything, it's going to be a long time of nothing creative happening, but a lot of work being done for a long time.
Hmm. Going back to the what you said about the enjoying the little things, I recall when you were designing Level Up Land 2. So Level Up Land is a role-playing game. We have random encounters, and you fight enemies. In Level Up Land 1, it's just one character. Level Up Land 2, there are 3 characters. Yeah, and you're fighting enemies, and you have an end goal in mind. And most of the kind of, for me, the best thing about Level Up Land and Level Up Land 2 is exploring and learning what all the different things do, what all the enemies do, and where to go, and that kind of thing. So, in with regards to Level Up Land, I really remember Level Up Land 2. Sorry, I really remember when you. I think I had finished Level Up Land 1 by that point, and you were sending. You were not sending me. You were publishing, I think, messages on your Facebook. You were sending posts on your, putting up posts on your Facebook. Yeah, putting up posts on your Facebook of how you did the menus, for example. Well, not how you did the menus, but just showing like a prototype of how the menus are flying in. And you could really tell that it was that you were really enjoying it, that it was really satisfying, and you were really proud of your work.
Yeah, because I know that when I made the first game, I wouldn't have been able to have done that. But, the more that you work with something, the more little things you pick up on, it becomes easier to start getting creative and think about how you can make things work. And so so for example, with the moving menus, the way that, like in Level Up Land 1, it was just a case if you had the one menu at the side of the screen, on the left side of the screen, and you just sort of programmed it. Well, I just sort of programmed in each entry in the menu to be at like X amount of pixels and Y coordinate, X and Y coordinates and all that. And then when it came to 2, I was thinking, oh, I could have like this other variable, which is like the position of the panels, and I could draw the text relative to the position of the panels. And I was thinking, oh, I could make it so that there's like this variable that like determines the destination of the panel, and then sort of use this equation where like the distance like goes down by like a certain percentage every frame, so it looks like it's smoothly going in. And I just came up with these ideas, and I was thinking, I wonder if I could make that work. And when I did, and it just worked, and you see like the menus flying from the sides, it was just really nice. Just made me feel so proud of myself.
Fantastic. What is the engine that you're using? What is the program that you're using to design your games?
Game Maker.
Game Maker. So Yo-Yo Games Game Maker. Do you ever find yourself tempted to try something, let's say, bigger or more advanced? For example, Unity or Godot or, dare I say, Unreal Engine?
Not really, because what I want to do, I know I can do in Game Maker. So, and even if I struggle, I have the tool set. So like I have the mindset, the framework to be able to like build upon it. But then if I was to move to something else, it would be sort of like I've got to learn a whole new bunch of stuff, and there's nothing I can think of where I think I need to move to a different platform. So I just don't bother. I've been using Game Maker since I was in my teens, like the original Game Maker. Admittedly, not very good, But um, I do actually have. I'll have to send you them. It's going to. I'm going to have to find a way to properly, because they're in their old game maker format. I made a few games, but using like sprites from Final Fantasy games and music from Final Fantasy games and Sonic games and all that, and using the very bare basic functions. So, the default message box that pops up and everything. But I'll have to, if I can find a way to get it to work, I'll have to show you some of the games I made as a teenager, because there aren't many.
Yeah, please do. It'd be really interesting to see how you
Yeah.
started out. So from one perspective, it's a case of you already have a good kind of routine. You have a good routine going. You have kind of you have Game Maker mapped out in your mind, so you really know what if you want to do. Firstly, your ideas are already kind of pinned to Game Maker, right? So when you get an idea, your brain is sort of immediately considering how it can be achieved in Game Maker with the knowledge that you have, which is fantastic. I think that really streamlines the process.
Basically, yeah. There is always the fear that in the back of my mind, there's always that fear of what if something that I want to do, I just can't.
With what? Because it's limited by your knowledge or your experience, or limited by the engine.
Probably not limited by the engine, just I suppose I don't know. I just think, what if there's a thing that I can't find I can't find a way for it to work, and the fear is like I'll do something where I'll sort of paint myself into a corner. I mean, it hasn't happened yet with the first two games. I mean, there's been parts where, because I remember when when I was doing Level Up Land 2, when you won a battle, it like played the first note of the victory theme, just like as like a droning noise, and then nothing happened. And I was trying to figure out, like, why is it doing that? I did eventually figure it out. I mean, that's just general like programming stuff. You do get these points where something just happens, and you're thinking, why is it doing that? And it can be like one particular like character or something in the code. And you just gotta find it out,
Yeah,
whatever it is.
yeah, I can imagine that. I have very brief experience using some proprietary code, but I think it's XML like. At least that's what a friend suggested it was. I had another question though, with regards to Game Maker and your experience with it. Not really specific to Game Maker, so this can be applied to anybody. Anybody could ask ask themselves this question. Do you feel that the limitations of Game Maker, let's say, so consider let's I'm not entirely certain, but let's say for example, Game Maker doesn't have as many features as Unity, for example. Do you feel that in spite of these limitations, or perhaps even because of these limitations, you feel that you have more room to be creative or more room to be expressive? So you're going to try to achieve things which are, let's say, not typical for Game Maker. Do you understand the question?
As in, can I find my own way around things, even if it's not?
No. Okay, so let me try and put it a different way. Um, okay, you want to do I think I'll have to use my own example.
Okay.
Okay, so I have experience I have experience above all else in designing levels or maps for shooting games. Just a few shooting games I have experience with. And I recall when I moved on to trying to design levels for Counter-Strike, which is a game based on Valve's Source engine, with the Hammer editor. It was really, really it was really liberating, let's say, that I could import my own models into a game, and if I wanted to, I could get the Eiffel Tower. I can get a real model of the Eiffel Tower, import it into the game, and I could set my map in France, for example. And that was incredible. But that would, of course, involve me either finding and converting a model of the Eiffel Tower or making it myself, which is a lot of work, which adds many, many hours just for the effect of making the map seem like it's in France. Whereas the game that I'm most familiar with, which is Delta Force Black Hawk Down, this game didn't allow you to import your own models. You were only allowed to use models that were already in the base game. And the base game was set in Somalia, with expansions in, I think, in the Amazon rainforest and in Iran. So again, in the desert. So of course there were no Eiffel Towers available. But if I wanted to, I could create an Eiffel Tower using just blocks from the game. And the most common block used was a metal cargo container. So it was like a corrugated, rusted metal thing. And I would just position loads of them around the map to resemble the tower. I mean, I don't think I ever created the Eiffel Tower, but I created another tower, something similar to the Ostankino radio tower in Moscow, in Russia. So I recreated that in a level, and of course it looks horrible because it looks like it's all rusted metal, but it kind of achieves the goal with a limited tool set, and it also doesn't take as much time for somebody who's a complete novice, or somebody who's not particularly skilled like me, to do so. So, in regards to Game Maker and Unity, there are going to be some things that aren't available in Game Maker, for example, that are in Unity. And have you ever been in a situation that you've wanted to do something, you know that you know that it's possible because other games do it, but you can't, so you kind of use, let's say, simpler methods or simple strategies to get it done in your game?
Oh, not really. I can't think of anything other than, I suppose, and this goes back to like years ago when I did all the whole thing of making games with like other sprites and stuff from other games.
Mm-hmm.
When it was basically just messing around to see what I could do. There were like other Game Maker games that I did play where it was like, I don't know how they did this. And a big example of that at the time, was dealing with gravity. So you can like walk left and right, and you can jump, and semi-solid objects where you can jump from below like a ledge, jump up through it, and then still land on top of it.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have any understanding of how that would even be possible. And now I would have to like look up tutorials, because I haven't made a game like a platform game for so long that, I mean, with RPGs, what you're designing mostly is stats and abilities and all that, and you can sort of figure it out. But with like the platform type stuff, I'd really have to like delve into it and find a way to make it work. I don't know if this answers your question at all.
Not particularly, but I understand that my question is kind of, I suppose it's kind of specific to my experiences. But I was curious to see if there was a kind of situation like that, and I think your answer shows that perhaps no. I was wondering also, have you heard of RPG Maker?
Yes, I did actually try one of them a little bit, but I didn't really do anything with it. I tested out some stuff to make a cutscene work, but that's all I did. And it does seem very, very limiting from what I've seen. I mean, there'll be stuff that, if I delve deeper, I could find more stuff, but it seemed very limiting from my perspective. And I just thought I'd rather find a way to get something to work on Game Maker, because this actually, before I made Level Up Land 1, I was thinking, could I make something through RPG Maker? This was, I mean, Level Up Land 1, I started designing that around 2014. So I think it was like around no, actually, it was even before, because I remember in 2012, I started designing what would eventually become Level Up Land. It was completely different, though. There wasn't a map, it was all just menus. and I abandoned that, which and that eventually became Level Up Land. So maybe like 2010, 2011, I sort of thought, well, maybe I could, and then I just thought, no, I'll use Game Maker because whilst it seems to be more complicated, it's a case of there's more tools to use there, which is always the balancing factor with creation tools. You've got the ones that are like, oh, it's easy to use. You can do this. You can do that by clicking on this. But if you want to get more advanced, you're going to have to get to stuff that's just more complicated to use or more depth involved, I suppose.
Hmm. Well, I think earlier on you mentioned so with Level Up Plan 3, you're getting near the end of the really, really creative part. So when you're designing all the bits and bobs, let's call them, of that
Yeah.
that will make up Level Up Plan 3, and you're approaching the phase where you're going to be doing a lot of work just to get things done to get it working. How do
Yes.
you motivate yourself? Or like I could explain how I am with this kind of thing. Or is it kind of you don't need to motivate yourself because it kind of comes naturally? How does it work for you?
To be honest, I don't know. I just sort of have moments where I am motivated. Like I'll get to these stages where I'm into it and I just want to get through it. Like when I was working on Level Up Land 2, a lot of the work on Level Up Land 2 when I started, um it was a case of trying to find ways to make things work, not within like the program of Game Maker, but like the design of the game, like how you're going to get spells and like the enchantments and all that. How am I going to make that work? And then I got to it was like the start of 2020, and I just suddenly got really busy, and I just worked on it all the time. I don't know if I can explain how I get the motivation. It's just a case of I really get into it and I do get bored of it, but it's just a case of I want to get it done. And it's probably not healthy to get into that mindset, but that's just what happens. So I'm thinking with three, what I'm hoping with three is that I can go a bit slower, but going a bit slower for a game that is going to require more is means it's going to take a lot longer to get it done. But then it's a case of will that actually happen, or will I just get to that motivation stage again
Hmm.
where I'm just doing it all the time?
Well, I think it's out of your hands, to be honest. It gets to a point where it's out of your hands. Maybe you begin hoping that it's going to work one way, then it kind of takes on a life of its own.
Basically, yeah.
So recently, I've been working on. Okay, I've been working on. I told you about this. I was working on a tutorial for noobs. So for people who have no idea how to do things, who have no experience of Unreal Engine 4, to design a level for a particular game on Unreal Engine 4. So the game is called Task Force Elite, and it's made by people who loved the Delta Force games that I played when I was younger and I designed for when I was younger. Now, this is based on Unreal Engine 4, so it's 3D, and it's Unreal Engine 4 is huge. It's an absolutely immense program. It's very, very impressive. And actually, I could get into this later on. I've been designing a level for the old game back from 2003, and Unreal Engine 4 is actually so much faster to design for, to do the fun parts, like to put things down and to reposition them, to add, grass or to mold the landscape, things like that. So that's actually a lot faster and a lot more user friendly than the old game, which was, in the program you're limited to a wireframe mode and you have to export it into the game to test it. Whereas in this Unreal Engine 4, you can test it while you're in the Unreal Engine 4 editor. So I designed a tutorial for people who have no experience, like I had, like I had no experience in Unreal Engine 4, to design a level for this game, and I think it's a valid idea for a tutorial, or valid idea for a project. It took a very long time. I started in October. I worked on it for about 2 weeks non-stop. I got quite far, but then all motivation just dropped. I was not interested. I didn't want to do it. I was actually fairly busy as well, and I only picked it up again in at the end of January or in February, I think. And then in February, I worked on it, I think, for a week non-stop. So when I got home from work, I had something to eat, and then I just started working on it. In the morning, I would work on it. At the weekend, I would work on it all day, with breaks, of course. But that was where all of my free time was going, and that
Yeah,
was. It's not a creative, so I. It's actually quite a small percentage of making this tutorial was creative. So the creative process was, let's say 5%, and 95% is taking screenshots and saving them and formatting the Word document and writing the text. And the text is often just copied from before with some words changed, and then lots of proofreading and checking. And at one point, I missed out a screenshot, and by that point, I'd already done and named. I'd already taken like 20 screenshots and named them in the document, and I didn't set up any kind of automated process for the naming. I was just typing the numbers in, and so I had to just go and rename all the photos and change the files. Basically, it was a massive headache. But I was in some kind of crazy mindset that I was just I had limitless motivation to get it done, and I can't imagine that would work for a creative project, a project that's solely creative, such as, I don't know, for me at least, for example, writing a book, where I have to constantly writing a work of fiction, where I have to constantly imagine things, invent things. I don't know. I just find it so much more difficult. Or, for example, in your case, designing a game. So I think in your shoes, I would really struggle with the designing process. But when I get to the point where I finish designing and I'm ready to start doing the difficult, let's say not the difficult, but the less creative stuff, I would have the motivation to do it.
I find like with the level up land games, I do get to the point where the things that aren't the creative, where it is just typing in the code and all that, I find there are moments where it's like I know I'm in that mood. I know I'm in that mindset where I don't want to have to like think about how things are balanced or how things should look or anything like that. I just want to get on with it. I'll just open up like this thing. I'll just count spaces. Just go right. 3 goes here, 2 goes there, and 1 goes there. Enter, enter. Now 5 goes here and 6 goes there, and then there's 2, and I just do that for hours I mean, generally not hours at a time, but it takes hours just doing such monotonous counting spaces and putting in numbers and all that sort of stuff, or copying, pasting stuff. And I do get moments where I'm just in the mood. I'll just put on like a soundtrack or something. Usually Final Fantasy VIII soundtrack. That is very much my soundtrack for just background noise for whilst I'm doing mindless stuff. And I'm just in the mood just to get on with that because it's like I know it has to be done. I'm just going to zone out and do it.
Yeah, that mindless stuff is something really I can relate to.
So you were saying before about making things in games, but so far with me, we've only discussed making like actual games, which obviously includes all the things in the games. But I was thinking more along the lines of, in regards to this topic, things that I've made as a kid, like level editors in games. And I know we discussed this before on the Lost episode where the audio quality was really bad. Like level editors and character creations and stuff.
Hmm.
Is that what you were trying to get at when you said making things in games?
Yes, so designing video game things. And I think making this tutorial, for example, is a video game thing. It's related to video games.
Yeah.
But there's not much really more for me to say about that, other than I think I'm a pretty good. I made a pretty good tutorial, foolproof, I believe it was. Yeah, so designing things in video games. So I think you mentioned in that Lost episode uh, that you designed something for Time Splitters 3.
Yes, and we were just talking about Final Fantasy VIII soundtrack. Um, yeah, I said I don't remember if I mentioned. I think I mentioned then that I made a level based on Balam Garden,
Yeah.
and this was. I think this is its own type, like its own subcategory of making things for games, making things in games that are representative of maybe not your own creation, but just represent some other thing. So you see what that thing is like in this other thing. So with this example of Time Splitters, I made a level based on Balam Garden, and it was just like the factory layout, and the corridors were color coded based on the different rooms around Balam Garden, and then the final boss was Nog, who you went down into the basement and it was like flashing blue, the room, and Nog was just some guy. But
Just some bloke.
yeah,
But anybody who knows what Balam Garden is, maybe somebody who's as invested in Final Fantasy VIII as we are, or as we were, sees your creation, sees the color code, and thinks, "Oh, I know what's going on," and then they go down and they just see some bloke. But for them, all the right synapses, all the right sort of the wiring of their brain has all pointed towards the fact that this is Nog, and they'll say, "Ah, of course, it's Nog."
I think there's something really funny about that. Something about using like limited tools to just create something that other people know in another context. Like I can imagine, for example, like in a Tony Hawk's map or something, someone trying to make Balam Garden, and it's like, well, obviously this doesn't look anything like Balam Garden, but I can see what you try to do
Yeah,
here, and I
exactly.
like it.
That's
Yeah.
it. So, speaking of Final Fantasy VIII stuff, okay, this is probably going to be a recurring theme. We're always going to wind back to Final Fantasy VIII, but with a friend, Minecraft is obviously a game with endless possibilities. I don't
I
know if I
think I
showed
know what
you. Did I show
I
you at
think
one
I know what
time?
you're going to talk about. I don't think
I created like a re like life size. I can't say because I've never been to Central Ruins, but I created basically Central Ruins with a friend who had never played Final Fantasy VIII on Minecraft. So I think it was when I was living in Russia for a year, in the winter when where there's daylight only for a few hours outside of. I think I only had daylight for about 2 hours before school, and then after school it was already dark, so I didn't really have much energy to do, or motivation to do anything else. So I was online and played Minecraft with a friend from school, and one of the things we did was create poetry in Minecraft, like really, really stupid poetry inspired by the Vogons from uh, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Well, we won't talk about that. But one of the things we did was build Central Ruins, and I think I did a bloody good job. But sadly, it was on an online server somewhere, and I can't remember. I don't think we have many pictures of it left. But anyway, I created Central Ruins, and I think that creation was something that even, let's say, a fan of Final Fantasy VII, somebody who's really loved Final Fantasy VII, bought Final Fantasy VIII because they thought Final Fantasy VIII was going to be like Final Fantasy VII. They played through it once and never played it again. I think even that kind of person would have recognized it as Central Ruins. So I think Minecraft, as far as kind of creating things from other games in a different game, unrelated to the original game, yeah, I did a good job. Or we did a good job.
yeah, I saw. I've just remembered then I saw a video of someone made who made a Mario Maker level, which was of Pokemon Red and Blue,
Oh, wow.
and yeah, and I watched it, and I didn't really get it at first, but you start noticing because if you know how Mario Maker works. You know, like Mario, the different Mario creatures, like the different enemies and all that. And if you know Pokemon, you could sort of see the correlation. So, for example, there was one point quite early on where they go into this room and there's a chain chomp just doing something. I forget how they made it work. It's quite elaborate, but they just had this chain chomp just doing its own thing. And then I realized afterwards, that was Brock's Onyx. So
Uh-huh.
I can connect the dots now as to what it was meant to be.
Hmm.
I suppose, it's also like, and this is going uh, back. This is sort of like another branch of like creating things based on other things. I remember because I had FIFA 98. It's the only FIFA game that I've ever had and that I've ever played. But it was just because we got loads of like copied games for the PS1. I had FIFA 98 and I just remember making a team which was just the other kids in my class.
Oh yeah, I can relate to that. I had Pro Evolution Soccer 3. No, sorry, not 3, 4. I had Pro Evolution Soccer 4 2 years after it came out. So I saw it at a Comet. Was it a Comet? Yeah, it was a Comet store. And it was a bargain for £1.50, and I convinced my dad to buy it. It was for PlayStation 2. Anyway, yeah. So, do you think do you think this kind of thing is dying out now? So games are less. There's less incentive, I believe. I think that's quite clear. There's less incentive for game developers of huge games, huge titles, to include user created content. Let's call it, even though I hate the word content. But anyway, user created content. Um, do you think it's going to die out? Do you think basically that's going to stop being? It's going to stop being possible, for example, to design levels like I enjoy doing, or things like designing your own skate parks in Tony Hawk's, where you just have a million half pipes because you want to. Do you think it's going to be impossible?
I don't know because when I think about it these days, it's it's like I think of Roblox, that type of stuff, where
Okay.
it's more like the thing itself is a tool rather than just a game that has a tool in it where you
Hmm.
can create these things. And I think there is something particular about having a game where you know the rules of the game and you know how the game works itself, and you're presented with the tools to make a level or make a character or whatever.
Hmm.
And I think there's something unique about that as opposed to something where it's just like we've given you this tool set where you can just make games, you can just make these different things. I think the things in general where they can, like if I'm thinking of more modern examples of game creation things, I am thinking of like Mario Maker, and I am thinking about like Little Big Planet and Roblox and stuff like that. And those games are more centered around
Hmm.
user generated content, as it were.
Yeah.
Just that's like the whole point. And I think that's a distinct thing from in the older cases where it's like there is a level editor, there is a character editor, but it's not the game, it's just a part of it.
Yeah. So I think. Okay, I would like to. I don't. I'm sure you don't know too much about Delta Force Black Hawk Down. Sorry, one of my speakers just fell over. Um, so the main selling point of that game, I think, with hindsight, was the level editor, the level editing tools, because they were so foolproof, and user friendly. I think back then they were user friendly. Now, not particularly. But they were definitely so foolproof that anybody could just design a level and export it and play it online with their friends, provided they host a server or somebody can connect to them. Um, and I recall that game lasted a very long time. I mean, today I think there are probably only going to be around 50 people playing, 50 unique players each week, I imagine. But I think I started 4 years I started playing that game 4 years after it was released, and I just can't imagine. And that even then, sorry, even then the player numbers were absolutely massive, and every server you went on had its own, had dozens of its own levels designed for it. And if I compare that to a modern game like, dare I say it, Call of Duty, because it's just a game that people play, let's say, the shooting game or a shooting game, generic shooting game in inverted commas. I can't imagine it being um, so successful years after its kind of its initial popularity fades, and there are other new games coming after it. So I think what you said, that there is a game is released, and it also has this just like an extra thing, as an extra kind of unique selling point, perhaps, or an extra afterthought even by the developers. I think they are quite valuable, and um, I can't imagine it actually being something that publishers or studios desire to do, because if we're stuck playing a game that was released 10 years ago, well, it means we're not playing the current game, are we? We're not spending money on the microtransactions for a new character, because we can design our own characters in the old one. We can design a whole team of our friends in the old one, whereas in this new one, we have to buy generic celebrity number 47.
Yeah, I mean they do this whole thing of, I mean, this is getting away from the topic a bit, but they do this whole thing of, this game is going to last 10 years. We're going to be doing this, like it's a live service and all that sort of stuff. And then a couple of years come around and it's like, right, we've got a sequel coming out and it's all about the new thing. And I get it. It's marketing. It's what they've got to do.
Hmm.
But um, although I suppose that sort of applies to even in the non-creative aspects. Like, it's always a case of, oh, here's the new thing. And I've always found it strange the way that people, individual people, will sort of jump ship to whatever the new thing is. Whereas I've always found, like, the most interesting cases are the ones that you sort of stick around, and you can always go back to, I don't necessarily, even if not to play it, but just to like absorb media, like watching content online. There's that word
Hmm.
again, content, you know, um, and learning about how the mechanics work and the intricacies and how to defeat this certain boss and the secrets and all that. And I think that once something's been around for a while, it still holds that point of interest. And the only thing that would erase that point of interest is overexposure. And I think that is something that doesn't really happen. I feel like I'm straying away from the conversation here, and it's quite hard to get my points across. But it is the whole thing of, oh, it's about the next game. That's definitely something that I've noticed.
I think that's everywhere though, not just video games. I think that is
Oh,
just it's capitalism gone mad, health and safety gone mad, capitalism gone mad. It's just constantly. Okay, I would like to bring up another point. Okay, this isn't actually to do with designing video game things, although it kind of is. Um, bear with me. This is more about shooting games, so get your shooting game cap on. Battlefield 4 is a game that was horrendous when it launched. It was just full of bugs. Everyone said, "This is crap. Let's go play Battlefield 3 instead." And it was quite difficult. It was quite bad. Then they just made it slightly better, slightly better, slightly better, until it actually became a decent game. And to this day, I think it's a fantastic game. One of the best things about that, though, was that if you host your own server and you don't play on the official servers, like I think you had to do on no, even consoles had community servers. So if you play on a community server, the person who owns the community server can adjust the rules. They can adjust, for example, what vehicles you can have in the game. So, for example, imagine you're running around shooting like soldiers, and you can have transport vehicles, or you can have tanks and helicopters and planes and things like that. Well, the person who runs the server can decide um, loads of different rules, and some of them are, for example, well, what vehicles there are, how much health you have, and what weapons are available, what weapons aren't available, that kind of thing. Now with Battlefield, okay, so the next one was Hardline, which was, I think, much the same, but people didn't particularly like it. Battlefield 1 came along, which was set in World War One, and they just did away with all of those community tools. So you could only play the game the way they intended, not the way that you want to, not the way that you enjoy. So there was no kind of creativity involved in how you approach hosting a server or how you play with friends with regards to with regards to refining the gameplay to your liking. I remember I played on a server, a Battlefield 4 server, a few years ago with my brother and a few people from Europe and a few people from America, and we'd go on most evenings and we'd play a few games. And here we had the rules exactly to our liking, and it's what brought the community together. It's what brought these strangers from across the world together in the same server, playing with a really fun set of rules. And basically, that's been gutted and removed. They've gotten rid of community servers. They're not interested. And I think this is, again, I think this is like we were saying with the planned obsolescence. They're making games with the intention of moving on to different things, to different games in the very short future. That's the way I feel things are going. That's the way I feel things are going.
Yeah. I mean, I've noticed, and I mean, I suppose this stuff just comes with age, but whenever like E3 would come around, I've never really been like excited for it because I'd no interest in like the majority of the games that came out, or just the majority of the announcements. I mean, every now and then there'd be like something I'm like, oh, that's interesting. And like when I was a kid, and a friend of mine had a PS1, and I became really jealous. I wanted a PS1, and then eventually I did get a PS1. And then in secondary school, there was that was when the PS2 came out, and it was like, oh, the PS2, and I saw PS2, and I played it, and I was thinking, oh, the graphics are great and everything. And this is sort of maintained. And I remember when I got a PSP, for some reason, I had this image in my mind that I was just going to stick around with this forever. It was like, oh, this permanent fixture in my life. I don't know why. I don't know why that happened, but when I got my PSP, I remember just having that mindset. And I do get to the point where whenever there's an announcement, and whenever there's this new thing is coming out, or oh, we can do this thing we've never done before, I always think to myself, yeah, whatever. Do you get
Hmm.
that?
I think after a while you experience enough. You experience enough that you perhaps aren't you don't find things as enjoyable as you did before, or as you did to begin with. Final Fantasy as a series now. When they announced something new, I think I was really excited when they announced 13 and Versus 13. I can
Yeah,
remember. So I played 8, and then I played 10, 10-2. I didn't play 12, but my friends at school did. And then when they announced 13, everyone I remember who was interested in Final Fantasy was really excited for it. 13 versus 13. Oh, it's going to be amazing. Oh, it's going to be amazing. And then it never came. Or then it was delayed so long. And I got to the point that once they released 13, I just didn't care. I just wasn't. I was just fatigued by it all. And 13, I think I played a few months or maybe even half a year to a year before after it was released. I started playing it, and I got quite far, but I think I gave up halfway through. I think I've never completed it. And by the time 13.2, and definitely by the time 15 was released, I just did not care at all. I just wasn't interested. And I think the same goes for things like E3. And I think, to be honest, moving beyond video games, films as well for me. I must sound like just grumpy old man hates everything, but that's how I feel. Nobody can say that that's not how I feel.
Well, sometimes I think I don't know. I sort of feel like game design is losing its edge. I mean, sometimes things come around and I don't get to it. Like Breath of the Wild, for example, that's a game where the things I've seen and the things I've heard, it makes me think, oh, that's interesting, but I don't have a Switch and I've never been motivated to get a Switch. And so it's just not something I've ever played. And so that's something where it's like I have a little bit of interest, but not really. So I just don't get to it. But I still think it's possible to stumble across things that I find really good. Like I love Rainbow Moon, for example.
Hmm.
And like we were talking about with Final Fantasy, Lightning Returns, the third game in the Final Fantasy 13 series. And if we do an episode about unconventional mechanics
Hmm.
at some point, we should. That is definitely a game that I would list as having unconventional mechanics because it's just so weird. But I think it's fantastic. I think it's a brilliant game. But I do sort of sometimes reminisce about just the excitement I'd feel over discovering a new Final Fantasy game, even if it's not new, even if it's just new to me, like finding some music from Final Fantasy 2 and I hadn't played Final Fantasy 2 at that point. That stuff was exciting. And that is sort of like a nostalgic thing.
I can remember. I can remember back before smartphones. Now there was a time before smartphones. Let's remember. Back before
Ah, yes.
smartphones, we had dumb phones, and these dumb phones had Java games. Those really, really, really simple games on phones. And I remember there was a Vodafone store, so I had my contract was on Vodafone, and these games cost £5 each, and they were just. I don't think they're worth £5 with hindsight. I mean, or maybe just we've gotten so used to games being so cheap with the likes of Steam and so on. Anyway, um, I remember I downloaded on a dodgy website. It was called mobile9.com. I don't know if it still exists. If it does exist, it's probably obsolete because nobody plays those dumb phone games anymore. But I remember somebody compiled or made Final Fantasy 1 on Java for those old phones. And I remember playing Final Fantasy 1. Oh wow, these memories are coming back to me. So I remember playing it, and the graphics were really, really simple. I think possibly worse than what it was like. So maybe it was remade for the Java game. Anyway, the music was really, really simple. So definitely not as good as what I recall it is now. Um, so I think I played the PS1 version. So yeah, definitely won't be as good. Anyway, the point is, I played this game and I just was mesmerized by the fact that a Final Fantasy game can fit on a phone in like, and I think the game was only like a couple of dozen kilobytes big as well, or maybe like a few megabytes big. Um, and okay, no, it's definitely a few megabytes. Um, but yeah, I was so mesmerized with the fact that was so small. I thought there must be a catch. There must be like part of the game that's not available. And I remember playing up until the beginning of the game when you get to the bridge and then you hear the overture play.
Yeah.
And I just thought, oh, that explains it. They've just cut it down. It's only like a demo of the original game, so I won't play anymore. That was actually the first time I ever played Final Fantasy 1. And I stopped playing because I thought it was just like a dumbed down version for mobile phones, even though that was the beginning.
So that was that. I take it that wasn't like a SquareSoft officially endorsed
Oh
thing. It
no,
was
no, no.
just
I think it was just some bloke made it.
see, and that fits into the theme of people making things like for games.
Yeah. I think I told you on the in the last episode about Pokemon Super Eevee Edition.
No, I don't think you did, but you have
I have mentioned
talked
it
about.
before.
You
Okay.
have during one of the Level Up Land 2 streams.
Aha, okay, that makes sense. And I actually even showed it during Level Up Plan 2 stream. So, yeah,
Yeah.
so Pokemon Super Eevee Edition is some guy, I imagine, loves Pokemon. He especially loves Generation 2 Pokemon and Generation 3 Pokemon. And so he decided he wanted to make his own sort of abridged version of Pokemon. But he also loves Final Fantasy, and he's torn between the two franchises, and he just doesn't know what to do. So he's decided he's going to mix them up. And so he uses the kind of ATB, the active time battle gauge thing from Final Fantasies, practically all of them, um, and mix that with Pokemon. So you don't catch Pokemon, so you don't catch any Pokemon, but you can get a few of them, and they're in your party, and they have move sets like in Pokemon, but they have more of them. So they don't have just four, they have more. Basically, he's just remixed, remixed and added a bit of Final Fantasy to Pokemon. Yeah, and he just made it, and I can't imagine he sold it. That'd be impossible, but he's made it available. I'm amazed that Nintendo hasn't come after him and just sued him to death. Um, but yeah, that's something that somebody just loves a video game that they played, and they wanted more of it, so they just made themselves some more.
So here's a thought, right? If we're talking about creating things in games or creating things about games, usually we're talking about like creative projects here, but would you include things that people make for their own sake in regards to helping them get through? Like, for example, when you were playing Level Up Land 1, you had that Evernote file and you started making like a checklist of the goals and stuff. Would
Yeah,
you consider that like a creative project or like a creative or making a thing within a game or about a game?
that's actually a really good point. So I was learning. But the thing about Level Up Land 1 is that it was brand new to me. There was no guide online anywhere. It was a game that somebody had played, a few people had played before me, and I actually had watched some two pieces of footage of the game before me, so I had a little bit of an idea. But beyond the areas of the map that I had seen those people explore, I didn't know anything. All I knew is that there was a cave somewhere with fairies inside it, and that I should beware because fairies are very dangerous at an early stage. Um, and so I was playing cartographer, and I think I named quite a few streams cartographer. So I was playing cartographer. I was basically going to places that it seemed like nobody had been before, and I was making notes and coming up with ideas that I could do to what to explore next and so on. So I think the unique thing about Level Up Land and Level Up Land 2, but especially Level Up Land, the first one, is that a lot of what you're doing, a lot of what happens while you play that game is inside your own brain. So my
Yes.
imagination was working overtime while playing Level Up Land 1. My monkey puzzle problem solving brain was working quite hard during that game. But when I compare that to practically every other game that I play, I choose games that don't involve thinking. That's my general kind of um that's my general uh that's my general goal when I play games, just to stop thinking and to just relax for a while. But Level Up Land 1 was just so different that I needed that extra help. I think I needed to make those notes and to plan a little bit more effectively. A plan to be a little bit more effective when as I play. And so I think it is. I think it is.
And I suppose
I think
also,
it
and
is valuable.
I don't, I don't want this to be just, the Level Up Land promotion show and all that, right?
Are you
Um,
sure?
no, but it's just, it's something like I made them, you played them, so it's just something we've got to a good access to. But I suppose also along that same line, you could count the flags as a
Yes.
creative project, especially with what you did.
Oh, I am really impressed. I like how I named that stream just before I did the first time warp in Level Up Land 2. I just named the stream and then he went a bit crazy with the flags, or then he went a bit mad with the flags. And I think as I was doing it, I was just thinking to myself, why am I doing this? This is so stupid. This is going to be, I didn't actually know if oh no, I think I did test to see if the flags reset. And of course, I think it says it in the tutorial that they don't reset. But after I time warped, and especially after there was such a long gap between me playing the game, I think it was 2 years ago now, and then I resumed playing this year. Now that I've got good internet and I can stream and upload, um, I was so grateful for those flags. And yeah, I
Yeah,
think, I mean, okay, so here's how I would say it's slightly different. I think there are five different flag colors available, right? Red, blue,
yeah,
no, four.
five.
Oh no, because it's green and grey. So there are five different colors. So I think designing video game things would be me, for example, designing Balam Garden using those things, and basically, for example, the library is blue, and it's roughly to the southeast, and I would draw a blue path to the base that's to the southeast, and then kind of map out Balam Garden that way. I think that would be more kind of a creative project than me doing what I did, which was like a flag highway. I think it was very creative, but I don't think it has the right connotation. The connotations of creative project don't really match the purpose for which I built my flag highways in Level Up Land 2. But
Yeah,
no,
and at that
it
point,
definitely was creative.
yeah, at that point, I think you have to sort of, I mean, concede might not be the right word to use, but you have to consider the fact that in order to get by in some cases in games, in order to be able to play the game more effectively, you have to have a bit of the creative juices flowing
Hmm.
because you have to like consider like different possibilities and different outcomes. And you get that. And obviously, I would try to avoid this with my own games, but you do get games where you sort of pick up on a loophole. It's like, oh, there's a little thing here. Could I take advantage of this? And
Hmm.
then your creativity is rewarded.
Yeah. I think that's like speedrunning though. Speedrunning is an incredibly creative process of
Yeah,
basically manipulating games to having it well, manipulating games to complete with an objective in mind to complete them as quickly as possible.
yeah,
I don't think it's possible to manipulate Level Up Land 1 and 2. I think they're just they've been designed so carefully that you can't do that. But with other games, definitely. I mean, the current creative project I've got right now, which is designing a cooperative level, so it's player versus computer, players versus computer level for Delta Force, Black Hawk Down. I'm actually considering, I'm not considering, I've actually implemented a few kind of cheeky areas where there is scope for there is scope for what's the word I'm looking for speed running. So anyway,
right.
I won't get into that because I think I'd have to demonstrate it with a video. I think it'd be a bit too difficult. But the point is, like there are just areas where I've been very careful about blocking off where you can go, but I've left a few really sneaky areas deliberately open. So for players who are really, really adamant to not go through the entire level, they don't have to pay me to skip it. But if they're creative enough, they can find out how to do it themselves. That's the way I describe it.
Yeah, and that's what you want when you're making stuff. You want to, ideally, you want there to be a variety in what ends up happening with the different players. You want people, I mean, if you can make a game, like say you're making a game and you've got all these different weapons and all that, if you can make a game where people argue about what the best weapon is, that's a good sign.
Yeah, you've done a good job, I think.
Yeah. I think it would be interesting to touch upon um what like in terms of game creation, maybe not when it hasn't gone as far as, actually creating something using a software or an actual like level within a game or anything. But what about just the stages where you've had ideas, where you've thought of things that you could do and like what your inspiration was at the time and how that was reflected by what you were playing at the time and all that, and just thinking about those rough ideas
Hmm.
that sort of just existed inside your brain.
I seem to have I have a fantastic ability to design things, to come up with ideas basically for games, for levels, for stories, for narratives, but they're just kind of I work myself up into a point where I think that it's absolutely fantastic, to the point that I think I'm a genius. Why hasn't anyone thought of this before? And then when I get to actually implementing it, I just either I just give up because the tools that I have or the experience and knowledge and ability that I have can't match the idea, or I just kind of lose motivation because it's such a big project. It's doable, but because it's so vast, I just kind of give up. Does
Right.
that answer your question, or not particularly?
I suppose so, but I mean, even I'm thinking of cases where it was even when you knew that you couldn't make it.
Uh-huh.
So I'm talking about like as a young child
Mm-hmm.
and you play like say you play like Sonic or whatever, and you're like, oh, there could be this level where you go around like a loop, and you go around this way and you do that,
Mm-hmm.
and you just sort of like think of different things because my my creative juices as it was did start off like in those early days when I was just start playing like my Amiga and when I got into Sonic and all that, and I started thinking of different levels and all that. And I do think back about some of the concepts I came up with. I remember I came up with an idea for a Tomb Raider game, like Tomb Raider like 1 and 2, because I really got into those games. And I didn't actually get to like properly designing anything, but I remember thinking to myself, because sometimes, did you ever have this where like you'd be out shopping and you'd see like the different aisles and you think like this could be a level, this could be the secret.
Oh wow. Yeah. I can
Did
relate to
you?
that. I can relate to that.
Yeah, yeah. I remember there was one time I thought to myself, right, what if you had like in a Tomb Raider game, you had a secret that was hidden inside one of the boxes that you push, but you didn't see it, and you could use this box to get up on a ledge, and on the ledge there was like a hidden lever, and the lever dropped something from the ceiling, and if it hit the box, it would like smash it open so you could get the secret inside. And
Uh-huh.
I thought, so that would be like the secret. But then I also thought, aha, also I could put a medipack there so that people find the medipack, think that's what this is for, and then leave, which
Mm-hmm.
makes it even more secret.
Yeah.
And
That's
I'm
actually a really good idea. You should make that.
and I was thinking to myself, I was thinking to myself just about how these ideas of putting up like a red herring and all that in this area, like putting a medipack on this ledge so that it obstructs the fact that there's another purpose for the area. I'm thinking, well, it's good that I was in that mindset at such a young age.
Oh yeah. That's it shows a lot of maturity as far as understanding. It's kind of like delaying rewards, or rewarding exploration, or rewarding creative thinking.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine, and this, I know you're gonna think about like this would relate to your experience, my experience watching you with Level Up Land 1, but the sort of this mix, it's hard to balance between. I want to make things hard to find. I want to make things secret. But if someone passes by it and they don't see it, it's like, why didn't you see the thing?
Uh-huh.
Why did you miss that?
Yeah.
So, I mean, the alternative to that is to just make it so that you see everything in plain sight. But then I wouldn't be interested in making something like that, I
Yeah, I think
guess.
it'd be boring, to be honest. Also, I think there's okay, so say your idea. I love it, by the way. I think you should I think I should write it down. I love your idea about the crate that's got something inside it, but you need to jump on somewhere to pull a lever to break the crate open to find a hidden treasure inside or a weapon or something. But the crate is also doubles as just holding like a med pack being on top of it. So somebody finds the crate, sees the med pack, oh, that's what that's for, and moves away. See, making something that sneaky, I would, as if I was to make it, I would enjoy. I would actually have more pleasure knowing that this person saw all the elements. Saw,
Mm,
maybe not noticed, but they saw all the elements required to solve the puzzle, but they just continued on blissfully unaware. I think I would enjoy that.
yeah, there is definitely something like something exciting about seeing someone approach a bit of new information and see them like even like seeing them like find a bit of new information, but seeing them approach it and maybe they've just skipped it or just little things like that.
It's like throwing a screwdriver, like an electric screwdriver into a monkey enclosure and seeing what they do with it.
Yeah, it's definitely very interesting, and that's what the joy. That's a big part of what the joy is in these things.
So something I can relate to absolutely is okay, here's a fantastic example from my experience of designing video game things and making things that are quite cheeky, not that important, but they're kind of like secrets. And I recall I once made a level for Black Hawk Down, which was in a railway station. So it was in set in railway station. There are tunnels and there are stairs. Well, not stairs. They were just ramps made out of corrugated metal cargo containers. But uh, so there were ramps to go up to the away from the platform, up into the ticket office and things like that. But I placed two concrete pillars, kind of. They're not standing vertically up. They were at an angle, so they were sort of diagonally. There was one concrete pillar, and then 1 meter above it, I think, or 1.5 meters above it, there was another concrete pillar. So they were meant to look like banisters, like handrails. And of course, somebody who saw my level would thought, of course, that guy tried to make handrails. That makes sense. That makes sense. Good effort. Good effort. But they didn't know that if you climbed in between the kind of handrail and the bottom rail, so the bottom one and the top one, if you climbed between them so that one was above your head and one was below your feet, and you pressed the lean button to lean left or lean right, it would zoom you all the way to the top of the stairs far faster than you could have gone by running. It was just like a random glitch in the game that the developers could never have possibly expected, and nobody would know until they tried it for themselves. For some strange reason, they crouched down and climbed between these handrails, and then started leaning, just for no reason. Would they have? Yeah. So only if they did that would they have found out about it.
That reminds me of I think I mentioned this in the Lost episode as well about the time splitters level. I discovered a glitch where if you fall from a height and you get into a vehicle, the moment you land, you won't take
Yes.
damage. You won't take any damage from the fall.
Yeah.
So I made a level where you had to use that glitch because it was a timed level, so you only had so long, and you had to either fall off the ledge, land where the vehicle is, and then get in when you hit the ground to avoid the damage, or you had to walk like around this like long staircase that was too long and you actually couldn't make it to the end of the level by doing it
Mm-hmm.
that way.
Yep.
That was even though no one really saw this level, in my head that was a way of saying to people, I discovered a glitch. if you can't figure out how to do this, then you're gonna it's like it's gonna stump people because people aren't going to think, oh, well, I can fall from a huge height if I just get in the vehicle when I land.
Yeah.
So it's a way of saying to people like, oh yeah, I've done this. It's like a it's like a cheeky puzzle. Like it
Yeah.
breaks the rules, and I
It's
know
really
how it
good.
breaks the rules.
Yeah. I think it's good. Okay. Do you have any other ideas? Any other questions or comments?
Um, I was going to mention, I suppose, I was going to tie this into something earlier, but I didn't get to it, and I suppose I'll quickly mention this. Not relating it to any topic besides just general like game creation and creating things in games, but Age of Empires 2. I remember, um, I did try to make a level at one point based off our school, and I made like the first 7 players, like they all had one character, and it was like me and my friends that played Age of Empires. And I remember one of my friends just was trying to make an Age of Empires level where it was like deciding like who's going to be the final boss, like what teachers are going to be the bosses and all that. Which, and because his dad worked there as a caretaker, he said he made his dad as the final boss
Okay.
of the he didn't actually get to making it as far as I'm aware, but this was it was the idea and all that.
Hmm.
But also with Age of Empires 2, I figured out a way that because you've got the custom scenario where you've got like the map and you've got all the different tiles and you can put things in and you can set like conditions or like when a unit hits this spot, trigger this text box or whatever.
Okay.
But I also discovered there was a way that you could create your own map, like random map styles, as it were. So I don't know how familiar you are with Age of Empires, but if you're playing like a random map, you choose like a map style. So it might be like Black Forest, where there's loads of trees everywhere, but the maps are randomly generated. It's just randomly generated within the rule set
Hmm.
of the map type that you choose. And I found a way that you could actually make your own random map types. So you didn't make the map itself. You just you made the rules that it followed, and it, it was all very codey. It was just like a text file, and I sort of got to grasps with some of it. I kind of knew what I was doing, but it was a bit messy. Like things didn't work out, things didn't balance perfectly. But it was just nice to be able to like have this idea. Like one I made was about, I think I called it Discovery, where everything's like quite open, but there are all these hidden outposts around. So if you got your scout to discover an outpost, you gained that outpost and it became like an extra like line of sight.
Hmm.
And it was really neat, even though I didn't really understand all the ins and outs of how the code worked. But it was really neat to be able to make my own random map styles.
I
So
think,
yeah, that was just
yeah,
an extra thing I was going to say. Yeah,
I,
that
th
was it.
I think I think maybe I was a bit too harsh before, and I suggested that modern games are moving away from this kind of creative, these giving the player, they're giving the customer these creative options. I think maybe that's a little bit unfair. I think it's just a few predatory companies, perhaps like we were saying before, planned obsolescence, but perhaps because the developers are just under so much pressure to churn out a game in such a short amount of time that they can't add these extra kind of features because really they don't have time for it. They're under so much pressure to create something playable, something that they can sell to the customer within this short period of time that they don't have time really to go beyond that. And then, of course, take into account the possibility of planned obsolescence. So, of course, that's not going to make it to the final cut. But I think there are going to be so many games that perhaps simply because I don't actually play too many games at least. I don't. play too many games, so perhaps that's why I'm not exposed to them. So I don't think I've ever played Age of Empires. Maybe I have. Maybe a very long time ago I played it, but I can't particularly remember it, and I wasn't aware that it had these kinds of options
Yeah.
available. So what I might do is do a bit of homework and go away before the next time. I'll read up a bit on Age of Empires because I'm actually
Oh,
curious now.
yeah, I loved Age of Empires. I ranked it when I did my ranking. I put it in my top 10,
Hmm.
so it was really high. But it's strange because I don't really play any other game. I don't play RTSs in general, and I don't think I've ever really played any other RTSs.
Hmm.
But I really like that one.
Well, I can end the video today on a stupid story
Okay.
of when I was young. This is something about being creative in video games. I made my own fun when playing a game called Command and Conquer Generals. So Command and Conquer Generals was one of the few games that could run on my PC back at the time. I had a very, very weak computer. One of the few games, sorry, that I had access to that my brothers had or that my dad just had for some reason, even though he doesn't play video games. Um, so Command and Conquer Generals is a real-time strategy game where you're just sending troops around. You go kill that guy, you go take this base, you go hack this place, that kind of thing. Now, I thought the best way to play the game is to okay, so when you start a game mode called skirmish, it's you just choose a map, you choose your starting position, you choose the starting position of all your enemies and your allies, and then you just have at it. And then the AI will build a base and they'll attack you, and then you've got to defend or attack them or and things like that. So it's kind of basic RTS stuff. And you get to choose your starting amount of money. So you can make the game more difficult for yourself or more or easier. So I think the options are you start with just $10,000 and that goes all the way up to $50,000. Now I thought when I was a kid, so this would have been 2004, 2005, so I'd have been 12 years old. I thought the genius that I was, if I go into the game files, into the game folder, I think it was like a config file for the skirmish game mode. If I change the starting money from 50,000 to -1, I will have infinite money. And so I launched the game. Turned out I had infinite money. So I thought, let's make the best army that the world has ever seen. And by the world, of course, that means my 12-year-old brain. And what I did was I started out with I chose the biggest map in the game, one with the map with the most kind of flat area. Or not just flat area, but the point is that I had not too many not too much dead space, so I could send troops anywhere that I wanted. I started as the American army, and I gave myself one really weak enemy. I think it was the Chinese army, or set on easy, so the AI wouldn't be bothering me while I created my huge army. So I set the enemy onto easy on the other side of the field, and I thought I'm going to build an absolute huge fleet of helicopters to destroy them, and they're not going to see. They're not. Then that poor general on the other side. He's not going to have any clue what hit him. And so I set about. I made one. I made a small line of defense, just to make sure that if they did send any troops, which of course the easy difficulty on easy difficulty they don't send any troops whatsoever. They just defend themselves. I set up a little bit of defense just in case the computer had any smart ideas. And I went out about building airfields. And I didn't build airplanes because airplanes, I could have a maximum of 4 per airfield, and I would have to have half a map of airfields. So I created attack helicopters. And without over exaggerating, I think I created around 250 attack helicopters. When in a normal scenario, you'd maybe have 1, 2, 3. You might have 3 attack helicopters if you're feeling rather decadent. And I created 250. And my poor computer they were just fine when they were there, when they were just still on the screen. But the moment I selected all of them and told them to go obliterate the screen, go and obliterate the enemy, um, well, it became a bit of a PowerPoint presentation. The game wasn't playing in frames per second. The game was playing in perhaps minutes per frame. And I think I left the computer on and I told them to go there. I went downstairs. I probably had dinner. I maybe went outside to play football or something. And by the time I came back, they had moved about 5 centimeters across the screen. They hadn't even left my base.
Yeah.
Oh,
When you said like all these attack helicopters, I would think it brought about this image of this album cover that I know where there's like just like these buildings and there's just like helicopters covering the sky.
yeah.
But I suppose I know that we need to end this, but I suppose like silly things is just like its own category of creative project. And I immediately remembered the time I played like Worms Armageddon. And I put it on like a 4-player mode with like infinite ammo of every weapon, and I just made all the worms teleport to, like the same one spot so they're in this pile, and then when I go back around to the first worm, just drop a holy hand grenade.
Oh, that's cruel.
Yeah, but it's funny.
I don't think I'll ever have a chance to share this. This is in the similar vein. I had a game called Need for Speed Hot Pursuit 2 on the PC. Again, on that computer, the same computer where I did all the crazy things. And on Need for Speed Hot Pursuit 2, again, if you go to the config file, so you quit the game, you open a text file, you can find some basic data for all the cars. Now, you can't change the top speed, you can't change the the handling and things like that. But what you can do is adjust the weight of the car. So obviously, the lighter the car is, the faster it will accelerate, the faster it will go, right?
Right.
But if you change the weight of the car to less than a kilogram, well, it just didn't go very well. Every single bump in the road just sent the car flying. And well, I imagined I would become first in every race because I reduced the car's weight down to nothing. It just, I lost. I couldn't finish the race. I got disqualified. Did not finish. It was embarrassing. Yeah, loads of fun that you can do with games that allow you to mess around with them. Fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, well, thanks
That's
very
funny.
much.
Yes, it's been a good one.
Yeah, it's been a very good one. So, we're still figuring out what to talk about. So I think the next one, you suggested unconventional mechanics.
Yes.
What I would like
perhaps, because I've got a few ideas in mind, but perhaps we could do a bit of work beforehand and write some notes.
Yes,
about
absolutely.
some examples.
So,
and I'll try not to talk about Level Up Land as much.
I don't think that's necessary, but you can avoid. That can be your challenge for next time.
Yeah.
Although unconventional,
I don't think Level Up Land really fits the purpose, but my brain finds a way.
Yeah. Just like mine, I will never stop talking about designing maps for shooting games that are long past their sell-by date. But anyway, that's what I hope we'll talk about.
Yeah. Okay.
But oh boy, I might have to actually play a few games or remind myself of a few games that have unconventional mechanics. But anyway, so thanks very much, and
yeah,
speak to you next time.
See ya.